Story 1. Well, I've got two things to share. First place, my eldest son calmly stood up in the middle of the sandbox at the public park, pulled down his pants, and took a whiz all over the sand. I have never moved so quickly in my life. Not fast enough to save the sandbox, but hopefully fast enough that my face was a blur and therefore unrecognizable to the other parents. Not that we ever returned to that park anyway. Second place, my eldest son again. This time it happened at a different park. He was playing quietly with some other kids who had shown up. Suddenly he was nowhere to be found. After about 30 seconds of panic, the other family brought him back to me. They had packed up their kids to leave and my son had trotted right along with them, gone into their SUV and buckled himself in. We did not know these people at all. My son told me that they had awesome toys, so I guess that was enough reasoning for him. He's in 5th grade now, and I dread what will happen in his teenage years. That boy is a wild go-getter. I'm just hoping he doesn't grow up to be a total loose cannon. Story 2. My grandfather passed away last year. Our entire family and extended relatives gathered at a small funeral home in southeast Kansas. It was early summer, and the weather was warm outside. Unfortunately, the air conditioner inside the funeral home is not working very well, so it was a bit stuffy. Everyone was sweating. My son and other young children were playing in the back of the funeral home. He came running to me, drenched in sweat, and gestured for me to take off his clothes because he was clearly hot. I removed his little tie and dress shirt, leaving him in his tank top underneath. He quickly ran off to play again. About 10 minutes later, I heard everyone giggling. My cousin alerted me that I might want to check on my son. He had decided to take off all his clothes and pour water over his body. Then he decided it would be the best time to go up on the altar and say goodbye to his great-grandfather in the buff. I was really shocked. I ran to grab him, even though everyone else thought it was the cutest thing. My uncle put his hand on my shoulder and said that Grandpa would have loved it, and that it was a perfect way to send him off. Grandpa sure loved his grandkids. He was an old country boy from Kansas. Story 3. My kids were both Beaver Scouts, and their weekly meetings were held in a local Catholic school gymnasium. They were also homeschooled, and I was doing my best to give them a secular education using the only school materials I could afford at the time, which were all religious. One year, around Easter, we saw that the Catholic school children had created rows of giant cardboard crosses. They lined all the hallways from floor to ceiling and were decorated with flowers. My son pointed and said loudly and happily, "Look, Mom, they're studying Jewish history, just like us." That was bad enough, but then we got to our meeting room. That day, we were reviewing the Beaver Scout promise. I promise to love God and help take care of the world. My daughter suddenly jumped up and announced to the room, "I'm going to promise to love Aphrodite because she's the prettiest." I felt like saying, "Yes, ladies and gentlemen, my children are free thinkers." Story 4. In 2000, I was laid off from my job during the dot-com crash. We had just enough money to get by, so we explained to our kids that we couldn't spend on unnecessary things. One day at Walmart, my son came running out of an aisle with a huge super soaker over his head. It was about 30 feet away from me, with probably 20 people between us when he yelled out, "Dad, I want this when you get a job." I didn't know if I should laugh or cry. I got him that water gun a few months later, though. To be honest, losing that job saved my marriage and probably my life. Now that our kids are adults, we talk about it and they remember some of the crazy things that happened. Long story short, we were both raging alcoholics and I was across the country 95% of the time. It was just a terrible situation. And how fortunate we are that life threw us that curve. We lost a lot of potential money during that time, like tens of millions of dollars in stock options, but it was the most transformative period of my life. During the months I was unemployed, we did a lot of fishing and playing video games. It was truly peaceful and wonderful. And we've moved on quite nicely since then. We haven't had a drop of alcohol since that time, and we don't plan to start again. Cherish the time you have with your loved ones, and realize that life isn't all about making money. That boy was mindful that his dad couldn't afford that toy. Maybe he just said it to put it on his wish list. Story 5. My ex-husband has been teaching really inappropriate things to our daughter since before she could talk. One day when we were at my doctor's office, a little girl kissed her brother on the lips. My daughter said to the girl, "You shouldn't kiss boys on the lips or you'll get..." Another time, my parents took her shopping to buy a toy for her birthday. She was having a hard time picking out what she wanted, so my father was making suggestions for her. He picked up a Barbie doll and said, "How about this pretty lady?" To which she replied, "No, what are you thinking? Barbies have a bad reputation." Nothing tops the time she called 911 on me to report an emergency because I accidentally sat in her Caterpillar and squished it. And oh, I just thought of another one. My daughter overheard me teasing my mother last Christmas about a giant string of pearls she uses to decorate her table. I told her that they looked like booty beads. A few weeks later, we went to my grandparents' annual Christmas party, and as soon as we walked in the door, my daughter announced rather loudly, "Look, Mom, Grandma has booty beads, just like Nana." Story 6. My son was little when we were strolling through the grocery store. I had him comfortably seated in the cart when his wide eyes locked onto a woman with a striking black eye patch. With pure childhood glee, he couldn't help but shout, "Look, Mommy, a pirate! Arr!" He even playfully extended his index finger like a hook. The woman with the eye patch didn't seem particularly amused, but to our surprise, another woman walking in the opposite direction found it utterly hilarious and burst into hearty laughter. My boy wore a proud grin, feeling quite accomplished for spotting a pirate. Then for a good month after my daughter's birth, my son had a knack for introducing us in the most candid way. He'd proudly declare, This is my mommy, and this is my daddy, and this is my baby sister. She drinks milk from mommy's chest. Yes, he would cheerfully emphasize the last part with a cute laugh. Story 7. A little boy snatched a candy bar at the grocery checkout line. I playfully said, "Buddy, you have to ask before you grab stuff." He exclaimed, "No, Daddy, please don't do anything crazy." I learned my lesson. I've never resorted to physical discipline, but he still shields his face with his arms whenever I reprimand him in public, as if he's expecting I would hurt him. I will never do that. That's a clever kid. He's got the authoritarian parent system figured out. Story 8. We went on a family outing to Blackpool, a seaside town in the UK. My sister and I were very young then. It was an amazing day. We went on rides, indulged in lots of candy, and strolled along the pier. As an extra special treat, my mom bought each of us a toy. I picked a stuffed British bulldog with a tag on its collar that read its name was Little Willie. On our way back, we had to wait for a long time at the train station due to delays. My sister and mom occupied one bench, while my older brother and I sat on another bench a short distance away, just far enough that normal conversation was difficult. Anyway, I'm sitting in a bustling train station, delighted with my new toy. Thinking my sister might be interested in it too, I shouted across the platform, "Kate, would you like to have a go with my Little Willie?" My brother found this very hilarious, but my mom was mortified. Story 9. I'm currently pregnant with a noticeable belly. I was walking with my son, and an older man with a huge beer belly walked past us. My son points and exclaims rather loudly, "Look, Mama, the man has a baby in his tummy too." Fortunately, the man didn't hear us. I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Same son, about a year earlier, we walked past a biker at a grocery store. Bandana, jeans, leather jacket, etc. My son points and yells, "Look, Mama, a pirate." In his defense, the bandana had a skull on it. I apologized, but the man just grinned and said, "Best compliment ever." Also, my youngest son has a bit of a Boston-like accent with certain words. No idea where it came from, as we live in the South. He learned that his shoes are called sneakers, but he doesn't say it properly. He drops the S and the K almost becomes a G. Think of the N-word. He hasn't said it in public yet, so we're trying to call them something else instead. Story 10. At a local grocery store, they have these shopping carts with race car seats for little kids. It's basically one of those small yellow and red plastic cars attached to a cart. It's completely covered and you can only see inside through the windows on the side. So back when my cousin was a kid, my aunt took her shopping. They chose one of those carts to use during their grocery trip. My little cousin was unusually quiet, but she was generally a well-behaved kid, so my aunt didn't think much of it. About halfway through their shopping, my aunt noticed that people were giving her the looks. She's a public figure, so she figured it might be people recognizing her. They reached the checkout and my aunt bent down to start unloading. At that moment, a diaper suddenly flew from the little car. It turned out my little cousin had, while fully clothed with shoes on, managed to undress completely while inside the store. My aunt swiftly picked her up, grabbed the diaper, and made a quick exit. They didn't buy the groceries, and they left behind the clothes. That cousin is about to celebrate her birthday soon. I might bring that up next time I see her. Kids do the dumbest things, but if she pulls that stunt as a teenager, they might really need to have a serious talk. Guys, if these funny stories made you wonder what crazy things you did as a kid that embarrassed your parents, then give this video a like and subscribe now. Story 11. The kids do a lot of silly things in public, but back in the 90s, I saw another kid do something really embarrassing. I was in Victoria's Secret and they were promoting a new line of perfume, so they had a table in the middle of the store stacked high with boxes of tiny sample bottles. There was a dad there with his pimply-faced teenage son, who looked really uncomfortable. He was shuffling his feet and back into the table without seeing it. The table crashed over and all the sample bottles bounced all over the floor. The kid stood there, his face red as a beet, watching in horror as the entire display slid off onto the floor. His dad laughed really hard. Poor kid. Story 12. We were playing outside when my son turned to me and said, "I have to go to the bathroom." I told him to go inside, but instead of going to the toilet, he walked past the door to the front yard, dropped his pants, and took a dump. If any of our neighbors had seen him, they would have seen a little boy taking a dump in our front yard. Maybe the most white trash thing ever. Another time when we were at Walmart, we passed by a Middle Eastern man wearing a turban in traditional robes. Then my son asked me, "Daddy, is that a genie?" Story 13. One day my husband took my daughter to the grocery store. At the time, she had a friend at a preschool named Kashan who had a different skin color. While they were waiting in line at the deli counter, a family walked up with 3 little boys close in age to Kashan. My daughter pointed at these little boys and loudly said, "Hey Daddy, look at all those Kashans." Then on another day, just as I got out of the car and was walking my daughter into the store, a black woman said to her, "I like your shoes." My daughter then said, "Thank you," and then looked at me and said, "Daddy, that black mom likes my shoes." Another time at a park, my son spotted what appeared to be a brother and sister from mixed races sitting at a nearby table. He yelled, "Hey, kids with different colors, want to play?" I was a bit surprised. The kid's mom burst out laughing. Maybe we should consider moving back to the city. Story 14. I was babysitting my hyperactive cousin, a boy who throws tantrums when he doesn't get his way. My uncle dropped him off for the weekend without mentioning that if he didn't get what he wanted, he'd disrupt his birthday suit and run around until he did. I ended up with him running around Bear and Target because he wanted the DVD. Another time I was at the wave pool with him. There was a plus-sized woman there in a bathing suit. He walked right up to her, pointed, and yelled back to me, "Look at her!" I tried to explain that it's rude to point and that people come in all shapes and sizes, but he yelled back, "But she's not even good-looking." And once when he saw a man in a wheelchair, he proceeded to make motorcycle noises. The man giggled, but I was mortified. Story 15. I've got one to share. I took my daughter to the restroom and brought her into the stall next to me. After helping her use the toilet, I instructed her to stay inside next to the door while I went to the bathroom. I sat down with my skirt modestly draped around me, and midstream she exclaimed, "Ew, Mommy, your pee smells funny." What can I say? I drink a lot of coffee. I could hear the woman in the stalls on either side of me chuckling. Then, in line at the grocery store, she, in that super loud voice only a child has, asked, "Daddy, why does that lady look ugly?" Also during the morning commute to daycare, the school bus was full of parents with little kids, elderly people, and a few kids running late for school. When the bus suddenly came to a halt at a red light, my daughter accidentally dropped her lunchbox and matter-of-factly remarked, "Well, that's a right crap." An older couple burst into laughter, some kids giggled, and the rest were glaring death stares. I couldn't recall ever using profanity in front of her at that age, and certainly not in such a strangely elegant manner. Well, kids today learn a lot from the internet, but at least that girl said a normal phrase and not a stupid skibbity-bop-bop or something. Story 16. One time when we were camping, I told my son he could simply relieve himself outdoors. Now, whenever he has to pee and we're outside, he shamelessly drops his pants, pulls up his shirt, just like Butters from South Park, and starts letting loose. And my daughter went through a phase where she would randomly tell grown men in public, "You have a bee, I have a flower," which of course was true but still very inappropriate. Story 17. My daughter yells, "Like Daddy, a Gangnam Style," whenever she sees an Asian man. I literally burst out laughing the first time she did it, and I'm pretty sure that's fueled her love of yelling it as loudly as possible ever since. And then there was the time she was sitting in a shopping cart at the grocery store and saw an old woman behind us. She said, "Look, Dad, it's a grumpy old troll." She picked that up from Dora the Explorer. The lady was not amused, but to be fair, she did look exceptionally grumpy. Story 18. My wife and I had recently agreed to quit smoking. One day after picking up my daughter from school, I was giving a friend of mine a ride home. My daughter asked me to stop at the gas station so she could use the bathroom. While she was inside, my friend got out and had a cigarette. I decided that I could have one too. So I got out and bummed a smoke off of my friend. Just then, my daughter burst out of the doors of 7-Eleven screaming, "Dad, I can't believe it! You're cheating on Mom!" The parking lot was packed with people and everyone was staring at me. I was standing there in shock with this dude who was supposed to be my cheating partner. It was hilarious. Story 19. When my son was really young and still struggling with speech, he ended up screaming the funniest and most embarrassing thing ever in IKEA. My father had a swing at his house that my boy loved to play on. He couldn't say swing, but he knew he always said wee-wee while swinging, so he named the swing Papa's Wee-Wee. We were shopping once and he wanted to go play, so he said he wanted to go play with Papa's Wee-Wee. We told him to calm down, but he got really upset and just started screaming and crying, "I want to play with Papa's Wee-Wee," over and over. And then when my youngest child was in the middle of potty training, I caught him with his pants down, whizzing against a tree that faced a busy road, during his brother's soccer game. Everyone in the crowd and on the road burst into laughter. When I ran up to him and told him that wasn't an appropriate thing to do, he yelled, "But Daddy does it in the yard all the time." Yeah, that kid was just being honest. His dad must be one good role model. Story 20. Recently, my daughter was obsessed with clocks, but she can't say the letter L. So, yeah, she'd go about it like, "Mommy, a cock, a cock." She also has a habit of pulling up my dress if I'm not paying attention. And God forbid we go to the grocery store while I'm wearing a dress. She'll kick her feet in the cart and make me flash everyone. We live in an apartment and my oldest son will sneak onto the balcony and whiz. I've been pretty good at stopping him, but apparently, he sneaked by me a couple of times because the security guard explained to me why I couldn't let my son just whiz off the balcony. He was pretty nice about it, but he let me know that there had been a couple of close calls with people being in danger of getting sprinkled. As he put it, kids can be a pain sometimes. Story 21. As I'm lifting my son out of the shopping cart as we're leaving Walmart, he starts shouting, "No, mister, no, don't take me." I'm grateful my wife was there and he bears a striking resemblance to me. Then on the very first day of his new preschool, we encountered one of the teachers who happened to be significantly pregnant. My son couldn't help but stare at her protruding belly. She, of course, noticed his curiosity, flashed a smile and said to him, "I have twins here," while gently patting her belly. Without missing a beat, he replied, "Did you eat them?" I've never turned so red in my life. Story 22. I was in a shoe store in a mall with my toddler. He was being good and staying close to me, so I took off one of my shoes and tried on a shoe from the store. I walked a few steps away to the mirror, and that was apparently the break he was waiting for. He grabbed my discarded shoe and ran out of the store, and down the mall, squealing with delight. I was a few seconds behind because I had to kick off the store's shoe and chase after him in one sock foot. It took me about half the length of the mall to catch him. I had to run through a long line of onlookers who were laughing at the sight of him with my shoe held high above his head. Story 23. One year, my entire family gathered for Easter at church. The choir had just finished performing a song, and my little cousin stood up on her seat and shouted, "Yay!" We all assumed she was enjoying the singing and applauding the choir, but then she added, It's over. We can go home now. And so we had to endure the remaining 30 minutes of awkward glances. That's my kind of kid. She's not afraid to speak her mind, even if it's a little bit embarrassing. I'm glad you enjoyed this. If you're looking for more hilarious stories about people doing stupid things, stay tuned to What's Your This Person Is on Another Level of Stupid story. Story 2 is a riot. See you there.